everybody. Hello. Welcome to Nutrition Club. Happy Wednesday. How are you doing today on this slightly rainy, grey, but not too cold day? So welcome. Hi, everyone. I can see you coming in, and just while people are joining, on the off chance that you don't know who I am by now, I'm sure you do. My name's Claudia, and I'm a nutritional therapist and eating psychology coach with 17 years clinical experience. I lecture at the British College of Nutrition and the Nutritional Healing Foundation. And of course, I'm here on Goldster every Wednesday and every Friday. So today, I have prepared what I hope is a really interesting session for you. We are going to talk about nature versus nurture, genes. Is it all in the genes, or is it actually, is the environment more important than the genes? There's some interesting questions that we're going to be raising today. And then we're also going to look at the nutrition around it and what can we do, what can we be eating, what can we be looking at from a nutritional point of view that can literally switch off the bad genes and turn on the good ones. I mean, literally, it's phenomenal. And this is where research is going. Research is going into the microbiome, obviously. Every other week we're talking about it. It's also going into epigenetics. Epigenetics is huge. So I've got some really interesting little snippets that I want to share with you to set the scene. And let's get started with that without further ado. So I'm just going to share my screen. Let me just find my screen share. There we go. Right. Okay. So first of all, let me just make sure that I've shared. Where is it? So I can share. There we go. Share the sound. Share sound. Okay, so this is basically speaking to a lady called Dr. Cara Fitzgerald, who's one of the most interesting people to listen to about epigenetics. And it's this gentleman here on this podcast who's interviewing her. But his first question, and we're not going to listen for very long, just 2 or 3 minutes, but his first question sets the scene quite nicely. So that's where I thought we could start listening to Dr. Cara.
The next level, the genomic level of nutrition. And this is so exciting. Potentially as a pathway into spreading greater understanding around this notion of epinutrition, we can go back and do a little scaffolding in some definitional work, some basic biology. So epinutrition is obviously referring to the epigenome. So potentially, could you walk us through what is the genome and what is the epigenome and what's the difference between the two?
Yes, and as always, Jeff, you have permission to interrupt me at any time on this journey and get me to clarify or pull me out of the rabbit hole. Whatever you need to do is fine by me. Let me just say that I love to just give a little bit of background because I think it provides context. We mapped the human genome in the early 2000s, and we really anticipated that it would be a Rosetta Stone providing us with guidance around what causes chronic diseases. Gene X causes heart disease, gene Y causes diabetes. We really thought that the genome mapping and completing that massive, extraordinary undertaking would provide us with some serious answers. What we realized actually rapidly was that, in fact, it was infinitely more complex, that it wasn't one gene, one disease, as we had anticipated, or a couple of genes causing causing heart disease, something simplistic. So we kind of put the genome aside, if you will. I mean, that's a little crass, but it ushered us into the era of epigenetics. And that is, how is the DNA regulated? So if we think of DNA as inert hardware, we need the operating system. We need the software of the epigenome to dictate what genes are on and what genes are off. And there's different biochemical marks that will tag the genes that will influence how genes are folded, how they open up to be transcribed, et cetera, et cetera. Just a bunch of different complex processes. I mean, as simple as the genome turned out to be is as complex as the epigenome is. And it's there that we have really dove in, with our whole being. And I'm studying it. And as you mentioned before, all of my colleagues have really turned their attention to epigenetics. So it's what turns genes on and what turns genes off. And this is where how we live our lives meets the genome. Like we're in the driver's seat influencing whether we're living our best lives or not, influencing what genes are on. Do we have good guy genes on, or do we have pro-inflammatory sort of disease-promoting genes on, et cetera, et cetera? So it's an extraordinarily empowering time in science that we have this piece of information and that we can see this and we can see the influence of our lifestyle inputs on gene expression. It's really extraordinary.
So I'm going to stop it there because this is something, if you're interested, I really recommend you listen to this interview. So really, I always say the genes load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger. So it's like Dr. Kara said, it's hugely empowering, because before we say, oh, I've got heart disease in my family or whatever, it's in the genes, but truthfully, there is so much that we can be doing to help ourselves. And I also like to think about royal jelly. If you think of a beehive and you've got all the worker bees, they feed one bee the royal jelly, don't they? And that royal jelly causes that bee, which has the same DNA as all the other worker bees, just by being fed the royal jelly, that bee becomes the queen. So we can transform ourselves into our own kings and queens just by really looking at what we're eating and what our environment is, and making small changes can really make a big difference. So when the word epi means on top. So it's not just about the genes anymore. It's about what's on top of the genes, what's influencing the genes. And all the studies that are looking into epigenetics are looking into studies of identical twins. Now, I know in the past we've looked at little sort of mini documentaries about identical twins and how they, do you remember we've looked at one study where we had, one twin was exposed to more sun, one twin was exposed to more stress, one twin had hormonal issues, and you can literally see the difference in their aging process of the twins. But what caught my attention, just to give you the very latest and most up-to-date information, is this study that was published last week, which is sorry, let me just clear this. Right.
Yeah,
oh, no.
it really.
So, right, look at this. So this was published on November the 1st. So this is how current we are. And this is, this is to show you it's very, very latest in the scientific community. But this is where they looked at identical twins or fraternal twins, where one twin was obese and the other was definitely not obese. So they found sets of 22 twins. And they found that an epigenetic signature in buccal or cheek cells appearing only for the twins who were obese compared to their thinnest siblings. So they found this biomarker that's showing up in the twin that's gained the weight. And it's quite interesting because maybe they'll be able to test for this biomarker earlier on for the general population, and then they'll understand if that person has a susceptibility to weight gain that is over and above the genes, because it's not the genes, because the other identical twin has not got this susceptibility. So it's interesting here. The proof of concept study was found a signature Yes, so they're looking at this to enable earlier prevention methods for a condition that affects 50% of US adults. Let's just see if there's anything interesting that I want to pull out. The goal would be obviously to be able to identify people earlier in life, but that is the very, very latest. And then I wanted to share with you just, is it nature or nurture? I'm going to ask the question before we watch the video. If you were thinking, if there was a baby that was born that was a large baby with a predisposition towards being a little bit overweight, do you think that would come from the genes of the mother or from the surrogate mother, from the environment? So what's your gut reaction? And then let's now watch this video and see whether it's the genes or the environment that really pulls the most influence.
Identical twins don't just share DNA, they also share a uterus. Might that also help account for some of their metabolic similarities? Fetal overnutrition, evidenced by an abnormally large birth weight, seems to be a strong predictor of obesity in childhood and later in life. Could it be you are what your mom ate? A dramatic illustration from the animal world is the crossbreeding of Shetland ponies with massive draft horses. I mean, either way, the offspring are half pony, half horse, but in the pony uterus, they come out much smaller. Thank heavens for the poor pony. This is presumably the same reason why the mule, donkey dad and mare, is larger than the hinny, stallion and donkey mom. The way you test this in people is to study the size of babies from surrogate mothers after in vitro fertilization. Who do you think most determines the birth weight of a test tube baby? The donor mom who provided all the DNA, or the surrogate mom who provided the intrauterine environment? When it was put to the test, the womb won. Incredibly, a baby born to an obese surrogate mother with a skinny biological mom may harbor a greater risk of becoming obese than a baby from a big biological mom born to a slim surrogate. The researchers conclude the environment provided by the mother is more important than her genetic contribution to birth weight. The most compelling data comes from comparing obesity rates in siblings born to the exact same mother before and after her bariatric surgery. Compared to their brothers and sisters born before the surgery, those born when mom weighed about 100 pounds less had lower rates of inflammation, metabolic derangements, and most critically, 3 times less risk of developing severe obesity, afflicting 35% of those born before the weight loss compared to 11% born after. The researchers conclude these data emphasize how critical it is to prevent obesity and treat it effectively to prevent further transmission to future generations. But wait. Mom had the same DNA before and after surgery. She passed the same genes down. How could her weight during pregnancy affect the weight destiny of her children any differently? Darwin himself admitted that the greatest error he committed had been not allowing sufficient weight to the direct action of the environment, like food, independently of natural selection. We finally figured out the mechanism by which this can happen: epigenetics. Epigenetics, literally meaning above genetics, layers an extra level of information on top of the DNA sequence that can be both affected by our surrounds and potentially passed on to our children. This is thought to explain the developmental programming that can occur in the womb depending on the weight of the mother, or even your grandmother. Since all the eggs in your infant daughter's ovaries are already pre-formed before birth, a mother's weight status during pregnancy could potentially affect the obesity risk of her grandchildren, too. Either way, you can imagine how this could result in an intergenerational vicious cycle where obesity begets obesity. Is there anything we can do about it? Well, breastfed infants may be at low.
Okay, I don't want to go. I don't want to go into that right now, but it is just to show you how incredible the influence is of our environment versus our genes. Do you find this fascinating? I mean, truly, it's remarkable. It's really, really empowering. And there is so much that we can be doing food-wise. So, I mean, obviously, before we get into the epi-nutrition, epi-nutrients, I just wanted to we'll just do a quick overview of other factors that influence our genes, the other epigenetic factors, which is obviously not my forte, not my speciality, but we will just quickly talk about them. Stress is a major one, of course, and there's so much here on Goldster we can be doing. Kath Temple is immediately after here. She's amazing for helping coping with stress, but bringing cortisol levels down, reducing our levels of inflammation, which obviously can be triggered by toxins as well. So environmental toxins, whether we're breathing them, whether we're getting them through the foods, the pesticides, but whether we've got, black mold can be a huge toxin and a huge load on the body. So just if you do have any mold anywhere, just try and get it addressed. Is really, really important. And you can get special paints that are antifungal that prevent it coming back, or do quite well at preventing it coming back. But reducing our exposure generally to these stressors will really help. But then what we're putting into our body is so crucial. And there are two key nutrients. There are two that are really, really important. The first one, that's the most important thing that we could be eating to ensure that we're switching on the right genes and turning off the ones that are driving inflammation, driving heart disease, driving all these other conditions, is folic acid, one of the B vitamins. So famous, isn't it, for women to take during their first trimester of pregnancy, because it helps with the neural tube formation of the fetus. But it's also really, really important for us, for our genetics. And the reason is because it helps with the methylation process, and it prevents the buildup of homocysteine. So over the last few weeks and months, I've been dropping the H word in more and more frequently, homocysteine. It is actually a marker that you could ask your doctor to test. Next time you have a blood test, you could say, oh, could you just please test my homocysteine levels as well? Just because we've been talking about homocysteine in relation to heart disease. Often, if someone has a heart attack and they've got low cholesterol, it's sort of a mystery. Why on earth did this fit, healthy person have a heart attack? It can be down to the homocysteine levels could have been creeping up. And it's also quite heavily implicated in cognitive decline and in Alzheimer's. So it is a good idea to test your homocysteine levels to know what they are. But actually, homocysteine really, really interferes with the DNA and will switch on inflammatory genes. So how do we get the homocysteine levels down? We have to have folate, folic acid. Folate is very, very important in this gene expression. It's the most important thing. And fortunately for all of us, folic acid is found in vegan and vegetarian sources. It's found in greens, leafy vegetables, asparagus, mushrooms, eggs. It's also found in poultry. It's sunflower seeds, rosemary, sage, coriander. It's found in lots of the good stuff. So as a precaution to support your DNA, just increase your veg. So I've been I have to say I've been really enjoying the Brussels sprouts recently, and the vegetables. I don't know why. I've just it's just different buying them here from Gibraltar. They're all so nicely packaged, and I don't know, there's more variety, I think is what I'm really enjoying. But I find I steam up some veg now, even if I'm having, I don't know, something really quick and simple, like some tuna mayo or bonito mayo or sardines on some oat cakes. Even if I'm having something really simple, I will steam some green veg to go with it. So I'm getting plenty of green veg at lunch and plenty of green veg at dinner. Just making sure, just upping the veg. It's really good. And maybe you're enjoying some of the butternut squash at the moment, and the pumpkin. Have you had some? It's so good. My favorite at the moment is to cut butternut squash in half, put it in the air fryer for 20 minutes, skin up, and then 20 minutes the other way. And literally I've just scooped out the seeds, put on some lovely, smoked paprika or some chili or some, something to offset the sweetness. And garlic. It's just delicious, really, really delicious. And then it's so handy because you've got it in your fridge for a couple of meals. So increasing our folic acid, our folate. And some people, you might think, okay, well, I'll take a folic acid supplement, and that's fine for most people. But there are some people who don't assimilate folic acid and folate very easily. And so for those people, it's a genetic thing. They don't their pathway isn't so efficient, and it's quite prevalent in countries like Ireland, actually. And so as an abundance of caution, if you were going to take any kind of supplement, if you discovered that your homocysteine level was a bit too high, you want to be taking methylfolate and methylcobalamin, which is B12, methyl versions, because that could be why your homocysteine level has crept up in the first place, because you're not assimilating folic acid very easily. And this will typically present with, history of miscarriages. That's probably the main one I can think of. So it is worth thinking. You can test for this specific gene deficiency, but in my mind, just as a cover yourself. If you were going to take anything, you can have it as methyl. And you can buy, so for example, if your homocysteine level was a bit elevated, there's a very, very good product on the market called Methyl Guard by Thorne Research. And you can get it on iherb.com. It's not the cheapest, but it's really, really high quality. It's got the folic acid, the B12 and the B6. It's got all the nutrients combined in very, very bioavailable forms. So foundation is food first, but if the homocysteine level is elevated, then we would need to bring it down with a supplement, I would say. And then, of course, so the second nutrient, you're going to guess it quite easily. Of course, it's got to be B12, because B12 and folate work together to bring the homocysteine levels down. So important. And B12 is harder and more challenging for definitely for vegans. So because it's found in, for example, liver, fish, beef, eggs, poultry. But there are some B12 sources of shiitake mushrooms, nutritional yeast, some of the sea vegetables. But it can be challenging. And I know that we've spoken in the past about if you're taking omeprazole for reflux, that can coat anything that coats the stomach lining, like Gaviscon, Rennies, omeprazole, anything that provides that coating can impair the assimilation of B12, just because that's where it happens. It basically we introduce, there's a factor called intrinsic factor that's produced in the stomach, and that helps with B12 getting assimilated into the body. And then when you've coated it, it just doesn't work so well. So if you are taking omeprazole, ask your GP to test your B12 levels. And this is incredibly well documented. The link between PPIs, which is omeprazole, proton pump inhibitors, which is the category of medication, and a deficiency in B12. So just ask for it to be repeated every 3 to 6 months. Maybe you're taking blood pressure medication anyway, and you're getting your kidneys checked every few months. It's the same thing. If you're taking omeprazole, get your B12 levels checked, because we want to make sure that it's at a good level. But also, with all of this data, it's always about trend is your friend, and we want to make sure you're maintaining levels, that they're not declining. And symptoms of a B12 deficiency can be really widespread. It can be anything from like pins and needles to extreme fatigue, to people thinking that they might be getting multiple sclerosis, or they might be getting Alzheimer's, because cognitive function can be massively affected. So our B vitamins are really, really important to our health, our vitality, but also to our genes. So really, really important. And then there are some other nutrients as well. For example, betaine. We talked about beetroot last week with the nitric oxide. Do you remember? Helping with the circulation and the microcirculation, and it's so good for the blood pressure. But actually, the betaine in the beetroot is also really good for it's a very strong antioxidant, which helps protect against the DNA damage. It's also found in spinach and egg yolk, liver, and sunflower seeds. So quite random, and again, good vegan sources. So everyone should be getting their betaine. Choline is also very helpful. Cauliflower is a good source of choline, and it's coming into season soon, cauliflower. Seaweed, beets, egg yolks. You can see there's a lot of similarities here. Eggs are particularly famous, the egg yolk, for the choline. It's very helpful for detoxifying the choline as well. So it's one of the reasons why, if someone was going to go out for the evening and drink some alcohol, it would be a good idea to have an egg, a poached egg or something, before you go out, just to help clear the alcohol from the body, and to prevent getting it tipsy. And so curcumin, the turmeric, very, very powerful antioxidant, very powerful. And then our herbs. So it's there's something called rosmarinic acid, and that's obviously found in rosemary, but it's also found in sage and basil and thyme and oregano, lemon balm, mint. So adding these herbs to our food is a great idea. I tend to eat quite a few herbs in the summer because they're so nice chopped up and put on top of salads, but actually they're great for the winter all year round. How can we introduce more herbs into our diet? You could be making your own pesto at home with some walnuts and rocket salad and basil, for example, with a bit of olive oil and garlic. Would make a really nice like green sauce to put on top of any bread, on top of any fish or chicken. You could be putting some fresh mint leaves in some hot water for a nice fresh mint tea. I don't know if the rosmarinic acid will survive the heat, but you never know. And putting dried oregano on all the food that you can, as I always think, okay, am I going Italian or am I going, South American with my food when I'm preparing it? Whether it's like a lentil chili thing, or is it more Italian lentil bolognese? And the dried oregano has more. 1 teaspoon of dried oregano has more antioxidants than 1 bowl of fresh blueberries. So the dried oregano is sprinkle liberally, and it's, of course, these dried oregano is amazing to add to your broths when you're making chicken stock when you're making bone broth, when you're then converting it into a soup. It's just lovely to add in all the oregano. And then when I'm eating my soup, on the table in front of me, I have the turmeric. So instead of adding salt and pepper, on our table is the turmeric, because then you can be sprinkling some extra turmeric onto your food. And while we're talking about soup, because I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a little chilled at the moment, and I think having some warm soup would be lovely. What I've also done is I've bought my cashews. So I soak my cashew nuts to add into my soup before blending, just because it adds some quality protein and it makes it really lovely and creamy. So I really recommend that. Instead of, for me, I wouldn't add dairy, but I know that you could use this coconut milk, for example, in a soup. That would probably be very nice. For me, I add in the cashews. I feel that they're really enhancing the nutrition, especially if it's a vegetable soup. Because how are you going to get the protein? Are you going to have it on the side? Are you going to have some sardines on the side? Where's your protein coming from for that meal? Because we want to keep our blood sugar levels stable through the afternoon. Okay, in terms of other epi-nutrients, iron is a good one. So where are we getting iron from? We can get iron from heme sources like red meat, actually salmon as well, or we can get non-heme iron. So this is the vegetarian source of iron from spinach, tomatoes, watercress, legumes. Dried apricots is very famous for the non-heme iron, but for some people, non-heme iron is harder to assimilate. For me, I can't rely on non-heme iron to build up my iron levels. So I sometimes supplement with iron bisglycinate, which is the gentle iron. Or you could go down the Floridix route if you need to boost your iron levels. For me personally, you might, if for anyone who's still menstruating, you might find that actually your iron levels are fine most of the time, but it's the week before your period, your iron levels can suddenly drop. And especially perimenopause can really bring on anemia for people because the periods can be so heavy. And then hopefully after menopause, post-menopause, you can be building your iron levels back up again. And so quercetin is another one. It's an antioxidant. It's commonly found, it's famous in onions, but it's also apples, berries, capers, chia seeds, fenugreek, the broccoli, leafy greens. We can't go wrong with eating more leafy greens. Vitamin A is another one that's very helpful for gene expression. But we wouldn't want to have too much vitamin A in our diet because it's fat soluble, so it can build up. And this is why, for example, especially during pregnancy, you wouldn't want to eat too much liver. Because of that high vitamin A content. So the safe way to get enough vitamin A into your diet is to eat the beta carotene, which then gets converted by the body into vitamin A. So it's all the carotenoids, the carrots, the pumpkins, the sweet potatoes, but also, of course, the leafy greens. Now, if someone isn't converting beta carotene into vitamin A very easily, and it can sometimes be associated with thyroid issues. The palms go really orange. So if you've got really, really orangey palms, and it's not from fake tan, and it's not from eating excessive amounts of carrots. I remember my little sister was overfed carrot puree when she was a baby, and she literally turned orange. Her skin turned orange. So yeah, we manage our vitamin A levels generally through eating all the carotenoids. Vitamin D, surprise, surprise, vitamin D is so important for so many functions. And I'm pretty confident about your vitamin D levels now, because I know that most of you are supplementing and you're taking the standard 1000 IU a day. For anyone with autoimmune conditions, they may well be taking the standard 1000 milligram dose a day, but you could still be very, very insufficient or even deficient. So it is, again, it's worth testing. It's worth testing. Because the vitamin D is hard to assimilate from the diet. It's D2, and D2 gets converted into D3 in the kidneys. So you're relying on the body to complete that process. So with any supplement, make sure it's D3 and not D2. And then last, but by no means least, is vitamin C. It's just a great antioxidant. Kiwis, strawberries, oranges, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, spinach. It's not just the fruits, the citrus fruit, for the vitamin C content. Okay, well that was my little list of epi nutrients. So hopefully I've inspired you to have. Let's see what meals are we going to make from these foods? Maybe we'll have a lovely omelette with leafy greens, or a frittata with all the. I love making the frittatas. I open up my fridge, I put baking paper inside my Ninja cooker, my slow cooker, where I put it on slow cooker mode. So I put baking paper this way and that way, and then basically I'll crack however many eggs I've got, 6 say, and I'll chop up whatever vegetables I've got in the fridge. So onions, peppers, you could do little bits of broccoli, peas, and anything that you've got in the fridge, freezer. Chuck it all in, mix it with the eggs, pour it in the slow cooker, and leave it for 4 hours on high, or 6 hours or 8 hours on low. And then you literally pull out your lovely warm frittata. And it's great to keep in the fridge for a couple of days for lunches. It's really good quality protein, and you've got all those nutrients. And then, of course, you could be doing your bone broth, your chicken stock with all the herbs and turmeric and everything else you can think of. You think, right, how can I enhance this? And whenever you are eating anything, right, how can I enhance this? How can I turbocharge this? How can I switch on those good genes? What am I eating here that's supporting my health? How is it supporting my health? And hopefully that will motivate you and keep you on track. Okay, what is this doing for my body? It will also help you become more mindful around food. Is harboring this sense of gratitude. It's just win-win. How am I nourishing my body today? What gift am I giving myself? It's an act of self-care and self-love. And truly, how we nourish ourselves is a reflection of where we're at with our self-care and with our mental health. And if we feel like we're not in the best place, focusing on the nutrition is a very virtuous circle, because we can start to feel better from the nutrition, and also we start nourishing ourselves better. We're giving ourselves better self-care. So anyway, I think I have done enough talking. I'm going to thank you so much for tuning in on the recording. I hope you found it interesting today. On Friday, we are going to be delving into our stomachs. So let me know. You can always send me an email if there's something in particular you would like me to talk about with stomachs. We can talk about reflux. We can talk about stomach ulcers. We're nourishing another organ of our body this Friday, and it is the stomach. So anything in particular you'd like me to cover, I'd be delighted to. So thank you so much. I'm going to switch the recording off now.